Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Con Report wherever you get your podcasts. You're watching on YouTube. You can see Sam Fortier over here. Anyways, you can check us out on YouTube. Go to the Empire Media page. We're there. You can always read my work on ESPN.com. Hit that like button and subscribe button if you do go to Empire Media's YouTube page. Anyways, as you can see, I'm joined by Sam Fortier, who is at the Combine office. Sam, I appreciate you joining me. So, we heard from Dan Quinn, Adam Peters today. In general, did anything really jump out to you?
Well, John, I appreciate you having me. When my editor sent me to Indianapolis, she said, make sure that you make time to get on the John Keim Report. And it sounds like you might be playing through a little bit of congestion. So I appreciate you playing hurt right now. So look, I think the most notable thing out of today was actually not from Adam Peters or Dan Quinn. The most notable thing to me was from the scrum that Ryan Poles, the Bears GM, had with Chicago reporters. And he told them that, look, we don't know what we're going to do yet, but whatever we do, we are going to resolve it soon. And he basically suggested that if the Bears are going to take a quarterback with their top pick, they are going to trade Justin Fields before free agency because, quote, I want to do right by Justin, is what Poles said. So to me, that says we will know the fate of the number one pick within the next 2 weeks, which is a really quick timeline. And I think it's going to be really helpful for us, for Commanders fans to understand if the Commanders go up, if they stay put, kind of where is the bank of these quarterbacks? Who are we really talking about at this point?
It's funny to stick it on that topic will be, and Paul's also talked about, by the way, shout out Mrs. Fortier, and just know with your son in Indy, what happens in Indy stays in Indy, okay? So don't ask Sam about this later on down the road. Just let him be right now. Anyways, with Poles, he also talked about that if they were going to trade out of that top pick, they'd want to get something substantial. But it makes me also wonder too, because there's a lot of talk. I always look at it from the perspective of Washington. Would you give up? How much would you give up to would you rather have Jaden Daniels or May plus all these picks or go get Caleb Williams? And I'd wonder if the Bears have to be thinking the same thing. Would you rather have, Caleb Williams or one of those other two guys plus the extra draft capital too? And I think what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I feel like the Super Bowl was a really good kind of litmus test for that, right? You can have a stacked roster with a quarterback who is pretty good. I think he's like a fine average quarterback. Or do you want to have a guy who has the shot of being the best quarterback in the planet? And obviously the Chiefs have that guy and he's, won it twice in a row. And I think there's a real reason that teams are swinging on these traits, in the same way that the Jets took Zach Wilson. I mean, obviously it didn't pan out, but taking those shots, I don't think that should stop you from saying, hey, like our process is just like taking swings on really talented quarterbacks. And so for me, I think it depends on the price. If you're going up one spot, do you have to give up? I think at a baseline here, we're probably talking about this year's one and next year's one. I think that's a baseline. Minimum. So, how much beyond that are you willing to go up one spot? The deal that I go back to that I reference is, when the Bears jumped the Niners one spot to get Mitch Trubisky, or when you're talking about, hey, the Niners went from 12-3 for Trey Lance. Obviously, that's a big jump, but kind of what are we talking about here? And if it's more than 2 firsts, I don't think I would want to do it. Right. But if it's 2 firsts and a third or a fourth, then it's more palatable. But I think it really comes down to, and this week is going to be important for this because it's the first time they're going to get in a room with Caleb Williams and Drake May and Jane Daniels. What do you think of these guys? Right. What do you see on tape? What do you see in the room? Are they capable of? Because if you think that any of these guys has a chance to be a Patrick Mahomes level superstar, I don't know if there's a price too high to pay.
Well, and I think that's where, to your point, this is what that week is good for. It's a start of getting to know these guys. And I know, there's also going to be pro days, visits. They'd go to their, visit them at their place, whatever. And so you're going to get a chance to know them, but this is the start of that to see, is this a guy that's worth investing into that level? Because that's a massive investment And I think that's something that, but the other thing, Sam, too, and I know like they're not going to be like, and Peter said this today too, but they're not going to be like these extremely active players in free agency. Right. And so I wonder how aggressive are they going to be, or are they going to let it just like let the process go, or which would mean keeping your draft capital, or do you just say like, well, when you have that opportunity, you have to take it?
I'm going to put on my tinfoil hat here and just say, I'm just not 100% sold on them not using all their cap space. I know, like to me, every GM says we want to build to the draft. Every GM says keep the main thing. And I think that those are smart, prudent, sustainable strategies. And I'm not going to like make fun of them in any way. But if you think to yourself, okay, because when free agency starts, we'll have clarity on have they traded up to the number one pick? They're going to know a lot more about their situation than they do right now. If you trade up and you say, okay, now we don't have that draft capital, but we know we're getting Caleb Williams, and we want Caleb Williams to have success, and we have a lot of holes on our offense, particularly on the offensive line. All these dominoes start to fall. And so I understand what Peters is saying right now, but I wonder if he's operating on incomplete information when he's saying those things.
And you know what? That makes sense, because if you think you're going to move up to try and get him, if you think there's a chance, you have an opportunity to still fortify your roster in a way that you haven't. And I don't think, like I will say, I don't think they're going to go be reckless with it. I've seen reckless here. And I do like, I don't think this is a smokescreen on his part to say, oh, we're not going to be active and then go jump in and spend wildly. I don't see that at all. However, if you get to that point, and let's say you have a chance to trade for him, that's where you can say, well, you spend a little bit more maybe to fortify to give that kid a chance.
Right. And I think that's the thing for me is, and even if they do spend, like you said, I think it will be smart long-term deals, smart. Yeah. And I want to go back to, I did a story about the 49ers a couple years ago, and I had someone tell me that they overpaid for Kyle Juszczyk. A member of their front office told me they overpaid for Kyle Juszczyk at the time, gave him the richest fullback deal in history, which honestly is not that big. There's not a ton of fullbacks. But his point was, look, this is a bad team, and we need good culture guys. And so we are willing to overpay some guys because they're going to come in and they're going to help us establish the mission and the vision that we want. And so I could see some of that as well. Like it's not going to be, hey, the best edge rusher on the market, we're going to give him a crazy deal. I could see like, hey, this guy, you wouldn't expect to get that much, but he does intangible things that we value.
London Fletcher was that guy a few years ago. And, with Josh Harris, they did that with the New Jersey Devils several years ago. And I'm going to forget the guys. It was a defenseman, excuse me. And they went out and spent before they were ready to win because they knew he could help get them there and then still be good when they were ready to win. But so I can definitely see action like that. And I still don't think they're going to trade up. I do think they like that draft capital. But who knows I don't know what the price is. And you know what I mean? I thought you were going to say something there, but yeah.
Well, just no, this is, I think, the fun part, right? It's the fluidity. It's right. Because Ryan Poles, to me, when Ryan Poles says that today, he is sending a beacon to every other NFL general manager that's saying, make your best offer and just know that we have a hard deadline here. So he is kind of setting an artificial deadline, which hopefully for him will increase the offers. And so, yeah, this is the fascinating part. This is the gamesmanship. And I think it's something for Adam Peters where I wonder, he didn't talk about this a lot, but it's the first time being in the chair, and what is the price, even if you're not interested in going up. Is there a certain threshold where you say, if it's this cheap or if it's this, if it's this or that, we are willing to pull the trigger? So finding that equilibrium and how he navigates this situation, I think is going to be really, really interesting considering how potentially transformative this number 2 pick has the chance to be for this franchise.
Right. And clearly you don't dismiss any thought of moving up out of hand, because the one thing we know about Josh Harris, he's a guy who wants all the information he can get. And if, to make a move, like if he goes there and say, what are you gonna do? We're going to stay put. Why? Did you look at trading up? Yes, but this was the cost. But if you tell him, no, we didn't look at it, then it's like, why not? Go check it out, because you need to know, right? You need to know every scenario. And that goes back, like the other one is Sam Howell. And I know they both brought him up and praised him and like him, but we don't know what's going to happen with him. But you have to explore all options. Do you look into possibly trading him? Do you just say keep him? I think you have to explore everything with them at this point.
A scout actually asked me this today. He was like, do you think the Commanders would trade Howell if they took a top kid? And a part of me wanted to say, no, would be a really good backup. He's won games. He makes a lot of sense. You should keep him here. And then the other part of me is, okay, so let's say you keep two quarterbacks like you've always done on your active roster. Why wouldn't you go sign Jacoby Brissett or another veteran guy to come mentor the young guy? And so if you're only going to keep two quarterbacks, there's no way Sam Howell's making it through waivers. So at that point, like, why wouldn't you try to recoup some draft capital for him? So I think there's strong arguments to be made for trading and keeping Sam Howell. And I'm just, not to waffle on this, but I really do see both sides here.
Listen, in this situation, my only point ever bringing it up is you have to explore every scenario, because if you don't, you're shortchanging your franchise. And the case for Sam is I think the kid can play in the league, and I think they do too. It's just what level, and he's got 2 more years on a rookie contract, and I think he's really good in the room. He's a smart quarterback. The other side would be you could go get a Jacoby. Let's say, again, Jacoby Brissett comes back, and we know how he is with young quarterbacks. Then you have your 2 quarterbacks. You get something for Sam because you don't, then you can go draft a guy next year following the 49er model about Brock Purdy came after a year after Trey Lance. Now you have 2 young guys on rookie contracts for 4 years. And so like that, so there's a scenario both ways. Like I said, I think Sam can play, and I think he'd be good with, just to see where he goes. But by the time he develops here with these coaches, he's going to be up for free agency too. So there's that back and forth with it. And again, I think you can make a strong case either way.
So the question is, what's the price?
Right.
If you get a top kid. So let's take the Trey Lance example. Trey Lance went for a third, I believe. Or fourth, maybe. If you got, so GM Keim, I'm, with someone and I say, hey, I'll give you, and you're getting a top guy. Let's just, say that. Right. If I say, hey, Keim, I'm willing to give you a fourth for Sam Howell, are you doing it?
I'll take a third. I want a third.
Okay. So I have to give you a third, or it's no deal.
Yeah. Give me a third right now. You going to do it? Or are you going to back out? How bad do you want him?
Wow. The John Keim Report listeners.
But that's what I would take. That's what I would take as a third. And, it's funny because I had these conversations earlier this week and I talked to them on the podcast, but there are some teams, I don't know how every team does it, but definitely some teams would say, if you consider the guy a high-end backup / possible starter, for an analytics standpoint, that's worth a 3rd round pick. So if that's the case, that's my price. And I don't know if they get that or not. I don't. But that's what it would take if and we're going to know, here's the other thing, Sam, before the draft, they will have that. If they're going to sign a veteran quarterback, we should know their intentions about what they're doing, just kind of playing, following the logic here too with it.
Exactly. I mean, there's going to be a lot of dominoes that fall that are going to give us indications about what they're going to do. And that's why, to me, like, the next 2 weeks are so fascinating. And if you look back at the, kind of supporting this, I mean, the Bears traded the number 1 pick to the Panthers last year on March 10th. So I think that, like, if we can leave the combine and we could have resolution to this thing even before free agency. So it's a really fun time to be following this story because I think a lot's about to happen.
Yeah, and it is. And I don't sit here and advocate for any one thing or the other, but you have to discuss all because they're discussing all. And again, if you don't discuss every scenario, you're shortchanging everything. The other guy that was asked about was Cam Curl. And I know prior to this, it was pretty quiet. It does sound like obviously they've had some talks now, but it sounds like they value him. Is that your take?
Yeah, but the question is, like, how much do they value?
Right.
Because it's so easy for me to say, oh, I value John Keim, but then if you maybe put a dollar sign on it, I don't know.
Wait a minute.
So I mean, look, yeah, I would say it was quiet, and then they have had discussions. I think one of the most notable things Adam Peters said today was that he was not going to use a franchise tag or a transition tag. So, what does this look like? I would guess right now that Cam Curl probably hits free agency. But I mean, that could certainly change. I mean, you're going to be meeting here this week. But I do think that Dan Quinn said this defense is better with him in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think anyone should ever have a question about how much Cam Curl raises the floor of this defense, how much he does. But the splash plays have been lacking. So what is the price for that? I know we've talked about that on this podcast before. Is it 12? Is it 13? Is it 14 per year? Is it lower? Is it higher? Those are, questions I think they're going to have to figure out.
So what do you think if he hits free agency? I mean, and it's hard to know because what are other teams going to put the value on him too? And those splash players are the ones that get you paid. But the risk, of course, is losing him. I also think they're in good shape at safety with Quinn and Derek Force. I think fit well with with the mentality that these guys want, but Cam is valuable. So, where do you think he would be? Would you be comfortable in that 12, 13 range?
If I were the Commanders, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think you would feel great about that. On the free agency market, admittedly, I'm not a cap expert, but I think he's a top 10, top 8 safety in the league. So, getting up to 13 and a half, 14 and a half, especially if you max your leverage by getting to free agency, I could totally see that.
And it's funny because that's one thing. And I don't know that other teams consider him a top 10 overall safety. I think when you're looking at this free agency class, he's one of the better safeties available. So that's how I look at it too, because that's what's going to matter is what's your competition at that position, how much you want to spend. And I don't know. I know for ESPN, it was Jeremy Fowler does a top 10 thing every summer, but he's talking to coaches, executives, and people like that. He was not on that top 10 list for whatever that's worth. But again, he's one of the better safeties available this free agency period. And again, and he's versatile too. And I think the more they talk about the big nickel, and a lot of teams go into that the more valuable I think he is.
One of the things I think we should pause and talk about here, Kime, is the salary cap, because the salary cap had a big jump, about $30 million, which the NFL called unprecedented. And obviously the Commanders have a lot of cap space. We all know that. One of them highest in the league. And I think actually the cap jump hurts them. And this is something
you had an item in that in your notebook online, so people can go read that, but go ahead.
Wow. The master plug is why I come on here, man. So I've talked to some executives and some agents, and they said basically, I thought Eric Eager from Sumer Sports had a really nice summary of this, which is he said, the cap is asymmetrical. It is worse to have little cap than it is good to have a lot of cap, basically. And so to me, some of the marginal deals or even the Cam Curl thing is these marginal deals, like teams that now have breathing room on the cap space are going to have, if they could have done 3 things before, they're now able to do 5, or they're able to do 3 things bigger than they used to. So I think it's important for people to understand, yes, the cap went up and theoretically that helps all teams equally, but in practice, it's not going to help all teams equally. I think the Commanders are probably going to have to, figure out how they're going to maneuver in a different way.
And which is an interesting point when I saw that too. It's which makes sense. So, but the other thing is too, they need a lot in free. So this is where there are some positions that to me they have to attack in free agency, including defensive end, another lineman, and things like that. That may not be, and some of them may be more, I wouldn't say under the radar signings, but more just, that's a good solid signing, more than it's a big splash signing.
This is what we're talking about, I think, because, and with the running back market being what it is, with the names available and like the prices they're getting, do you go get one of those guys? But I think free agency, they're probably not going to have the big headline on on our site or ESPN about they gave a big contract to this guy. But if you go get 3 or 4 guys where you're like, hey, this guy fills a hole, this guy does a thing that we need to do, and obviously you want more than that, but I think that would be a successful free agency to me.
I agree with you. That's why, it's funny because Matt Bowen had one of the guys he projected here was Jonah Jackson, a guard. And for some reason, I love that because I think there's a toughness that guy has, but those are the kind of signings where it might be like, it's not, it's not, T Higgins and going out and getting a guy like that, but it's a guy that's going to help you. And I think there's a mindset of players that I'd want to get in free agency too, which is just, bring guys who are going to help change the culture. I apologize for using that word, but I think that's what worked. But I'm by culture, I mean the play on the field, not so much like in the building, but just like the mentality in the room, right? And on the field, like those are the kind of guys that I'd be looking for.
I agree with you, but I think I don't know, man. Maybe I'm just like burned out from hearing the word culture over the last 4 years. But
I
you know what?
paused.
You know what? You know what changes the culture?
Winning.
And you know how you win? You get a really good quarterback.
Well, you do, but I also want I'd want to fill my roster with guys who have a certain mentality as well. So that way, and that's what I'm looking for. So if I'm going to go in free agency, those are the kind of guys I want to spend. Because I've seen all the other guys come parade through here who didn't have that, who were big time free agents because the knucklehead owner went a different direction. Excuse me, I probably shouldn't say it like that, but
I totally agree with you. And there are times where like I'm gonna want to nerd out about guard play and physicality and what they're doing in the red zone and things like that. But it's just, to me, when you have the number 2 overall pick, like, somebody was talking to me today about like, would you trade down if you were the Commanders? And to me, this is unsolicited, but that feels to me a little bit too armchair GM type, because that like stockpiling these assets and going, oh, well, if we like JJ McCarthy, we could trade down to 6 and he'd still be, no. If you think a guy is the guy, you go get the guy. Like if you think JJ McCarthy is that good, take him at 2. Like you just need to do everything you can to get the guy. And I'm having a hard time getting it out, but just like, you got to get a guy. That's the whole thing. That's the whole game.
And this goes back to the whole Sam Howell thing. While I like him, you haven't solved this position yet. You don't know that. So keep taking the swings, and you have the chance at number 2 to make a pick. And if you don't, I mean, I guess I would always say my whole point is if you don't like any of these guys, then trade back. The problem is you look at next year's class and there's zero guarantee. When will you be in this position again to possibly draft a guy? And they also have, it's not like they need a lot more picks, and that they have 5 in the top 100 here. So there's a way to still get better through the draft, address the line. You know, everyone wants to trade back and get Joe Alt. Well, there's good tackles that are going to be available in the second round too. So you can still address these positions and get the quarterback.
Well said.
I mean, so yeah, there you go. Any other, and as far as, I don't know if you've heard any other buzz with a Jaden or Drake May that you've picked up on there that you're able to share?
Contrary to the Twitter reports, I don't think that they have settled on a guy. And I say that because they haven't had those guys in a room yet. They don't know enough. I don't think that they are far enough along in their process to say this is the guy. One thing that I will say that stood out, Adam Peters and Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury have talked about intelligence and work ethic and mobility and these like traits that, it's been pretty nebulous, the traits that they've had. Dan Quinn today, I thought, actually had maybe the most concrete thing we've heard a coach say in our local scrum. And he said, deep ball accuracy is very important to us. And if you go back and look at it, man, I mean, we can talk about the receiver separation and we can kind of go through all these different things, but statistically, Jaden Daniels was the best deep ball thrower in the country last year. Yeah. 27 touchdowns, 0 picks, like almost a perfect passer rating. Like the dude throws a very, very good deep ball. And obviously he had great talent at receiver, certainly more than Drake May had. But when you just look at production on the deep ball, and I'm not drawing a 1-to-1 comparison here. I don't want anyone to think, oh, Dan Quinn said this thing, Jaden Daniels is very good at it, they're going to take Jaden Daniels. I'm just saying that when you get a concrete thing from a coach of what he's looking for, you look who are the prospects that are performing well at that. And Drake May was good, don't get me wrong, but Jaden Daniels was excellent.
So you're saying it's Jaden Daniels.
I'm saying open up your sports betting app and put your life savings on Jaden Daniels right now.
But it is like you give clues. And the funny thing is he also talked about toughness. He's talked about it a couple times and I think when you watch, I don't think you can ever accuse. I think though these quarterbacks seem to have that element of toughness to them, standing in there, or for Jaden being a little bit too tough at times, but he gets back up every single time. So like all that, I think you can look at it, but to the last point I would make too, and I want to get you out of here so you can hit the indie streets. But shout out Mrs. Fortier. Don't ask. But anyways, but the whole point about not being settled. This is a group that was very deliberate, has been deliberate through every process. And whether it's the coaching process and going through all that, very deliberate. And they, this is a group that seems to keep an open mind. So I think that's why it's not settled at this point. But yeah, I think you have to take note when they talk about that. The deep ball thing has been discussed a couple times by this group.
Yeah, and I would say that, this is something they've been talking about for years. I remember when Scott Turner was like, Carson Wentz is going to throw the deep ball better than Taylor Heineke. And then, they'd love to talk about Sam Howell's deep ball. And, I think a part of that is addressing the line, some of the things we've talked about. But, I got to go do a lot of drugs and run around with my shirt off or whatever in the Indianapolis streets.
Okay. So, all right. What stays in it, what happens in Indy stays in Indy. There you go. Thanks a lot, Sam.
Thanks for having me, Con.
All right. I told your mom you'd be in bed by 11:30 tonight, so make sure you follow through.
I'll be in prime at 11:30. That's for sure.
Well, I meant 11:30 a.m. So
there you go.
Morning. All right. Have fun. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, man.
For the ones who get it done, the most important part is the one you need now. And the best partner is the one who can deliver. That's why millions of maintenance and repair pros trust Grainger, because we have professional-grade supplies for every industry, even hard-to-find products. And we have same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders. But most importantly, we have an unwavering commitment to help keep you up and running. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.